Hello beautiful friends, my name is Brittany, this is Rescues and Reads, welcome back or welcome to the channel, welcome to another Bookmas video. Today we are here to do my pick or pass for both November and December's Book of the Month and Aardvark Book Club selection. When I made my Book of the Month predictions for November, I did mention that because I was going to be gone for November, I wasn't going to have an opportunity to come on and do a November pick or pass. I asked if you all still wanted me to include the November pick or pass in December, and you all emphatically said yes. So that is what I'm here to do today. But first, before we jump in, I have a couple of housekeeping items. If you hear some talking in the background, that would be my husband. His man cave shares a wall with my library, and he is currently working remotely for the next 3 weeks because he has a class that he is obviously required to actively participate in. I will try to pause when I hear him talking, but if you do hear that in the background, I apologize if it is distracting. And also the hair. I typically have my hair down in my videos, but over the weekend we went to the Ren Fair and I try to take advantage of their braiding services when I can. I love it even though it's absurdly expensive for the fact that it only lasts like 3 days, but having my hair up is like my natural state of being. Even if I start the day with my hair down, it always ends up in a ponytail by the end of the day. I just don't love the way that I look with my hair up, so that's why I typically film with my hair down, but I have a lot of filming to do, and so I was like, we're just gonna go ahead and do it with my hair braided. So you may notice some continuity issues with my hair in the next few videos because I'm not filming these in the order that they are being posted, so some of my videos could still have hair braided in between videos with me with my hair down, and I just wanted to mention it. Now, in full transparency, I have already attempted to film this video. I got all the way through November's Book of the Month and Aardvark selections and then December's Book of the Month selections before I realized that my microphone was not fully plugged in, and I could have definitely left it that way, but I really didn't want to put out a video with poor audio quality, so we're gonna go ahead and try this again. So starting of course with Book of the Month and their main selections. The first one we have is actually a romance, and it is called An Academic Affair by Jodi McAllister. The quick take just says this is a rivals to romance novel, and it says office hours get steamy when faculty foes get married to advance their careers. Now, it may actually surprise you. This is the only main selection that I made for November's Book of the Month. Y'all know that I'm not a romance person. I don't gravitate towards it. I very, very rarely get the Book of the Month romance selections, but this was probably one of the only main selections for November that appealed to me, and I definitely wanted one of the add-ons, and there were a couple of their backlist titles that I also wanted to add to my box, and so to prevent my box from getting any fuller, I was like, let me just go ahead and snag this. So that is what I did. It's going to be a top priority for me to read because, again, I don't know if I'm going to love it. I've heard a lot of really amazing things about it, and it has actually been recommended to me. I'm going to give it a chance, but I think under normal circumstances, this isn't one that I would have selected. We also have the newest release from Oyinkan and Braithwaite, which is a contemporary fiction called The Cursed Daughters, a multi-generational story about a family destined for heartbreak and the ways our lineages can and can't define us. This says it is a family drama, it features forbidden love, it's a non-linear timeline, and it is international. Now, I don't believe that I mentioned this in my prediction video, this specific book, because I don't think that Book of the Month has featured Oyinkan and Braithwaite, although I should, because just because an author hasn't been featured in the past on Book of the Month doesn't mean they won't be featured in the future. I know that Oyinkan and Braithwaite is an incredibly popular author. I have also read another release by this author in the past, and so I have a feeling a lot of people were really pleased to see this one, especially because I think it's going to be like a different take on the multi-generational saga, which is something that we do know that Book of the Month likes to feature. Next, we actually have a speculative fiction called The Lightbreakers by Aja Gabel. This moving story about experimental time travel asks, can revisiting our past heartbreak risk the love in our present? So this says that it's an unconventional time travel story that is rooted in science and memory instead of magic, which really intrigues me. It's an intimate story of love, loss, and marriage, and it has moments of melancholy as well as hope, and it packs an emotional punch. And it says, read this if you like sensational literary writing combined with philosophical observations of the world around us, resulting in pages that are full of lines you'll want to underline. This is one that is not a hard no for me. This is one that I'm interested to hear more about before I make a decision on whether or not I want to read it. So I would be very interested if you have read this story, what your opinion is, because I do think that it could be really, really interesting. Hello friends, Editing Brittany here. So I somehow managed to completely skip over one of the main Book of the Month selections for November, so I wanted to go ahead and pop on and discuss it here. It is a mystery called Her One Regret by Donna Freitas. The quick take says, a mother missing, a baby abandoned, a tense mystery about what can happen when societal pressures snap. Read this if you like compelling slow burn crime fiction that is equally as focused on its twisty mysteries as it is on larger themes and characters, unflinching and provocative stories with frank discussions of the more taboo side of regretting motherhood and marriage. And read this if you like unreliable narrators who you're never sure if you can trust and who keep you turning the pages. So this is not one that struck my fancy, although I am kind of intrigued on exploring the taboo side of regretting motherhood and marriage. That's definitely not something that you really hear discussed, but ultimately it did not intrigue me enough to add it to my box. And then the final main selection for November was a fantasy called Violet Thistlethwaite is Not a Villain Anymore by Emily Kremholtz, a cozy story about what happens when a villain retires. Think magic plants, grumpy sunshine romance, and lots of charm. Read this if you like cozy romances about starting over, redemption, and what it really means to be a good person. Read this if you like books based in captivating places you'd love to explore. Cue the magical creatures that range from dragons and rock goblins to a sentient and murderous plant. Read this if you like stories with high stakes that will leave you swooning. This villain retirement story is just as much of a rom-com as it is an adventurous fantasy. So y'all know how I feel about cozy fantasy. It is not a buzzword for me. It's not something that I gravitated towards. So this is certainly not one that I added to my box. It is potentially one that I could enjoy based on my love of the Assistant to the Villain series, but so far that has been like the only cozy fantasy story that I've enjoyed, and that's because I love the characters so much. And I haven't found any other cozy fantasy that's really been able to do that for me. So I know a lot of people probably really gravitated towards this because cozy is a huge buzzword right now, but it is not something that I did gravitate towards. And then if I'm not mistaken, Book of the Month had 3 add-ons for the month of November. The one that I really wanted and the one that I immediately added to my box was The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. I have Starling House in the Book of the Month edition, and so when I saw they brought The Everlasting on Book of the Month, I was like, yes, I absolutely have to have it. I'm a little bit more worried about this one because it's going to be more fairy tale-esque, and that's not really my vibe, but I'm going to trust Alex E. Harrow. This says, a shell-shocked historian and a medieval knight become inexplicably involved, transcending time, mythology, and love. This is multiple viewpoints, slow build, it's going to have a puzzle, and it is salacious. So count me in, I am ready for it. And then the last 2 are actually thrillers. We have a book called 59 Minutes by Holly Seddon. With 1 hour to spare before a missile hits London, 3 women are forced to fight for what they care about the most. It is a fast read, it's unsettling, multiple viewpoints, and LGBTQ plus themes. Now, this is not one that I added to my box because I actually don't love super quick, fast-paced thrillers. This sounds like it's going to take place in under an hour, and I really just don't feel like you can get the character connection and development that I typically want in my books. And so that is why I was not attracted to this one. It is not something that I feel like is going to give me what I want from the book. And then the last thriller was the newest release from Nicole Bart called Where He Left Me. I do believe that Nicole Bart has been featured on Book of the Month in the past. In fact, I think that is where I experienced her, was through Book of the Month. And the book that I read by her was honestly very mediocre. It didn't leave a lasting impression at all, unfortunately. And so that is why I really didn't want to get this one, especially after reading the synopsis. This quick take says, when her husband disappears in the midst of a snowstorm, a woman looks for answers by delving into his buried past. It's psychological, non-linear, slow build, and unsettling. Right off the bat, that didn't really feel like it was going to do anything unique for me. It didn't really seem like it was going to grab me and be a new favorite, so I didn't want to bother with it. So An Academic Affair was the main one that I added to my box. I also added The Everlasting, and then 2 backlist titles. I added Play Nice by Rachel Harrison, which I recently read, absolutely loved. That was my first experience with Rachel Harrison. It will not be my last. And then I also added The Haunting of Payne's Hollow, which was like a thriller horror that was featured a couple of months ago and that also grabbed my attention. So we're going to see what I think about it. Moving on into Aardvark's November selections. The first one we have is a debut literary fiction novel called Thirst Trap by Grania O'Hare, a bitingly funny novel about your late 20s as you stare down 30. When do you tire of morning hangovers, days of dead-end entry-level jobs, and late nights at bars? This friend group is about to find out. Brimming with heart and humor, Thirst Trap is an exuberant ode to friendship, to not having it all figured out, and to ordering just one more round before heading home. So it definitely sounds like this is certainly, as it mentioned, on the more literary side. It sounds like it's going to be an exploration of friendship, and these friends are now about to depart their 20s. They're going into their 30s, but yet they're not necessarily acting like you would expect like a typical 30-year-old would, right? They're still staying out late, partying, going to the bars, waking up with hangovers. I think that your late 20s is an interesting transitionary period, but it is certainly not one that I felt the desperate need to add to my box. And it's actually now sold out on Aardvark, so I wouldn't be able to get it there anyway, but I'm interested to see what people think about this one. Then we have a romance called Isn't It Obvious by Rachel Runya Katz. This says, after a meat disaster, a podcaster and her producer fall in love over email without realizing they know and hate each other in real life. Isn't It Obvious is a sharp, funny romance about loving the whole person and finally taking a chance on love. So just from that brief blurb, I'm getting the fact that this is going to be like a You've Got Mail trope, which is actually one of my favorite tropes of all time. However, I have found that most books do not do it very, very well. In my opinion, I feel like the communications between the main characters are often so limited and superficial, but yet I'm supposed to believe that these two people are falling for each other. So that's typically the part that is not done very well, is the communication part. And so that is one of the reasons why I would have hesitated on this one. Now, obviously I haven't read it, so I don't know. It could be phenomenal, but again, not really romance girly, not really gravitating towards this. So this one was a pass for me. Now, this next one is actually a thriller that I did include in my Book of the Month predictions. So I was expecting to see it there. It's a book called Haven't Killed in Years by Amy K. Green. No one is supposed to know harmless office worker Gwen Tanner is the vanished daughter of serial killer Abel Haggerty. But a low profile and a new name aren't going to cut it when an obsessive new killer starts targeting her. The apple never falls too far, after all. So I'm actually really intrigued by that. This is definitely one that was on my radar when I put it in my book of the month prediction video, and it is certainly one that I would be willing to read in the future. But this again, when I was considering adding it to my Aardvark box, I was like, do I really need this now? And the answer is no. I have plenty of other books that are top priorities for me. I don't know when I would get to this, and I'm trying to get out of the scarcity mindset. Because yes, I do know that Aardvark books do sell out, and if I don't grab this now, it could potentially be gone, and I might not be able to get it in the Aardvark edition, although I'm sure it would show up on Pango in the future. But just because it could be gone doesn't necessarily mean I need it now in the Aardvark edition, because I could easily get it in a normal edition in the future. And so I made the executive decision not to add this one to my box. But again, really interested in it, really interested to hear other people's thoughts and feedback. All right, next we have a debut fantasy called Kill the Beast by Sarah Swift. The Witcher meets Howl's Moving Castle in this debut original fairy tale of revenge, redemption, and friendship for fans of T. Kingfisher, Naomi Novik, and cozy fantasy with a dash of gritty adventure. So again, those are not buzzwords for me. I'm not a big cozy fantasy person. I've actually never read T. Kingfisher, although I may have the opportunity to start next year because she could very well be the author we spotlight in my Patreon. And so if that's the case, then I will definitely become familiar with T. Kingfisher. But I think that if I were going to read T. Kingfisher, I would be more interested in her horror than her more like fairy tale-esque type stories, which is definitely what this one is. So yeah, this one did not catch my attention. Now this next one is a horror, and I'm really curious about it. It is the newest release from Christina Henry called The Place Where They Buried Your Heart, and I do believe it is a haunted house novel. A woman must confront the evil that has been terrorizing her street since she was a child in this gripping haunted house novel from the national best-selling author of The House That Horror Built and Good Girls Don't Die. Now, haunted houses don't always work for me. Sometimes they do. It's not a buzzword for me, but I'm just more interested in like the character explorations overall. That's kind of what I really loved about Play Nice, although I have a feeling a lot of people have the opposite opinion, but I really liked the character journey in that story. So I'm wondering if that's going to be kind of the same thing here. I am really curious about this and Christina Henry as a whole, because I know that she doesn't just write horror, or maybe she does now, but in the past, she also wrote retellings. Like I do know that she did like a whole Alice in Wonderland retelling. And so because of that, I haven't necessarily been gravitating towards her because I'm not sure how that translates into the horror arena. So I would be really interested on your thoughts on Christina Henry, and specifically this one. If you have already read it, what your thoughts are and whether or not you think I could like it, because this is also one that really caught my attention and would be one that I would be willing to read in the future. And then this next one is also considered a horror, but it's also supposed to be a satirical comedy. It is the newest release from Olivia Blake called Girl Dinner. From the New York Times bestselling author of The Atlas Six, Girl Dinner is a darkly fun novel about power, lust, and eating your fill as wealthy moms and sorority girls practice a sinister new wellness trend. So that was an easy pass for me. I am not an Olivia Blake stan. I don't appreciate her writing. I didn't like The Atlas Six. I DNF'd The Alice Paradox, and I also DNF'd just 2 chapters in one of her other more recent releases. I can't remember. It was like about a family squabbling over an inheritance or something to that effect. I definitely don't get the hype behind Olivia Blake. Her writing doesn't work for me. So this is 100% one that it was an easy pass. And if you have been paying attention, that means that I didn't add anything to my box from Aardvark. And if I'm comparing the 2 boxes for November, I honestly don't have strong feelings either way. Neither book box really had selections that truly spoke to me. There was nothing except for The Everlasting that really said, okay, you need to have this now. I feel like some of the options that Book of the Month featured for November were out of left field. I don't really feel like I got many, if any, of the predictions correct for November. A lot of these I had never heard of, they weren't on my radar, and they weren't anything that I really wanted to pick up. So for that reason, I'm kind of indifferent about the Book of the Month selections and kind of also indifferent about the Aardvark selections as well. So you'll have to let me know your thoughts on which book box you thought was strongest for November. All right, moving into December, starting of course with Book of the Month's main selections, we have a contemporary fiction called Before I Forget by Tori Henwood Hohen. Her father is losing his memory, but she'll have to face her own in this poignant story of hope, love, and clairvoyance. Read this if you like heartwarming and realistic explorations of father-daughter relationships that honor how family dynamics morph during adulthood. Searching for silver linings when it's hard, this novel finds glimmers of warmth, humor, and hope in heartbreaking circumstances. Read this if you like when the cast of characters in your books feels like part of your family with a sprinkle of quirky small-town charm. So this is actually one that I had never heard of prior to seeing it feature on Book of the Month, and it was tempting me because I feel like it's going to explore a lot of really interesting themes. You have father-daughter relationships, you have a father who is losing his memory, and the daughter has to come to grips with that. And so I really feel like it's going to be very emotional, very hard-hitting, and that is definitely something that I like to explore, especially in my more literary fiction type of stories. But again, it's not one that I felt the need to add right now. It's not something that I felt like I could get to very soon, and I could easily pick it up elsewhere if it does sell out on Book of the Month. So I did not add this one to my box. Y'all, between having to pause for when my husband talks and letting Archie in and out of this room, this video is taking me forever on top of the filming that I already tried tried to do for this video. I may never be done filming this video. All right, so next for Book of the Month's December's main selections, we actually have a thriller called Best Offer Wins by Marissa Cashino. When one woman's obsession with finding her dream home goes too far, she'll take house hunting to a whole new level. Read this if you like delightfully diabolical protagonists whose increasingly unhinged choices will have you gasping as you read. Read this if you like fantasizing about your dream life while making it everyone else's problem. This narrator will stop at nothing to get the house and family she desires. Read this if you like cutting portraits of the American dream gone sideways. As long as you deflect with dark humor, you really can have it all. So this is actually one that my patron Andrea recently read, and she said it was wild. It was completely unhinged, and I don't know how I feel about that. I don't love thrillers that follow unhinged women and all of the really questionable choices that they make, so I'm not sure if this is one that I would normally pick up. It is a potential selection for my Patreon book club pick because she did nominate it as a potential option, so if it's selected, then I definitely will be reading it, and if I like it, I would consider adding the Book of the Month edition to my collection, but this is one that I'm really hesitant about, and so I ultimately decided not to add it to my box. So next, we actually have a fantasy. It's an early release, the newest release from Stasia Stark, called We Who Will Die. To survive in this epic arena, a hero must face bloodthirsty vampires, gladiator villains, and her own broken heart. Read this if you like magic systems grounded in history. This fantasy blends ancient Roman gladiator competitions with bloodthirsty vampiric twists. Read this if you like childhood romances that haunt characters into adulthood, only growing more complicated and dangerous with time. Read this if you like protagonists with heroic moral compasses whose natural wit keeps them 3 steps ahead of their rivals. So this is one that I knew almost nothing about. It's definitely been going all around the bookish internet, but it's not something that I was familiar with. However, it is on my radar, and it is definitely something that I have added to my TBR. But y'all know how I feel about fantasy books in the Book of the Month edition, which is kind of wild when you think about it because I allow every other genre in the Book of the Month edition, but I have a thing about fantasy in the Book of the Month edition. I will consider getting this elsewhere in the future, but it's not one that I added to my box for that reason, but it sounds like it's going to be phenomenal, and I know a lot of people jumped at the chance to get this, especially because it does have the sprayed edges. One that I was really happy to see featured was Good Spirits by B.K. Borison. B.K. Borison was actually featured earlier with her book First Time Color, which was my first experience with B.K. Borison, and I had a good time with it. It was fine, but I really enjoyed Good Spirits. It's kind of like a really loose take of A Christmas Carol. It was just such a sweet, charming little romance. It says, she's been nothing but nice this holiday season, so why is the ghost of Christmas past here to haunt her? Read this if you like when the holiday spirit is both in the air and alive on the page. From ice skating dates to Christmas pajamas, this cozy read will have you feeling festive all winter long. Read this if you like compelling leads with unconventional backstories. Think a cheerful antique shop owner having a meet cute with a hot, undead Irish fisherman. Read this if you like rom-coms with paranormal twists. This book perfectly pairs a steamy, emotional love story with just the right amount of ghostly magic, and I couldn't agree more. Honestly, I have recently found that romances with a slight magical twist really work for me. So I am excited to see it here, and I hope more people love it. The only reason why I didn't add this to my box is because when I was in the UK, I went into The Works. You know, that's a shop that I hear a lot of UK booktubers talk about, and they actually had a paperback edition of this with sprayed edges, and I know we have a version of that here, but I thought it would be a cool souvenir to go ahead and pick this up in the UK, and I did read it while I was in the UK, and I absolutely fell in love with it. So I'm really happy that more people are going to have the opportunity to experience it. Now, y'all, this next one, it is a horror, and it is calling my name. It is called Dark Sisters by Christy Demeester. 3 centuries of women and one twisted lineage. How many generations of witches does it take to stop a family curse? Not for the faint of heart, because this book is gruesome. Say less, right? Read this if you like when spooky season continues all year long. This haunting read is filled with moody, witchy vibes and atmospheric lyrical prose. Read this if you like books that showcase strong women who aren't afraid to put up a fight or tap into a healthy dose of female rage. I mean, like, really, say less. Read this if you like genre blending novels that deftly weave through centuries, offering a unique mix of horror and historical fiction. So I am all about this one. This is screaming my name. Have I added it to my box? No. Am I hemming and hawing about adding it to my box just to get this one book? Yes. It would be the only book that I add for December, and I'm kind of like going back and forth, like, do I really need this now? No. Could I wait until later? Yes, absolutely. I do need to read a December release for Herc yet, and I think this is the top contender, but I could easily get this as an audiobook and try it out before physically purchasing a copy, because that's really my concern, right? I cannot tell you how many Book of the Month books I've gotten that I really haven't liked and immediately turned around and sold on Pango. So like right now, I have not added it to my box. I have not checked out, but this, out of all of them, this is the one that would definitely get me because it is just screaming my name. All right, and then the very last one is a historical fiction. It is Buckeye by Patrick Ryan. This is actually one that I did include in a former prediction video, and this is Book of the Month's choice for their yearly look back. This says, one choice changes the fate of 2 families in this sweeping tale of war, heartache, and legacy. Read this if you like slice of life historical fiction. This novel infuses the small town drama of the Ohio homefront in World War II with universal resonance. romance. Read this if you like characters that aren't afraid to get messy. One adulterous choice kicks off decades worth of intertwined destinies for the two families in this novel. Read this if you like poignant, page-turning prose that explores timeless themes about inheritance, legacy, and the power of forgiveness. This is another one that's certainly going all the way around the internet. I've heard really amazing things about it. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about a book that centers on an act of infidelity that kind of changes the course of life for two families. This could be one that I'm willing to explore in the future, especially if I see it on other lists like the best books of 2025 according to BookTube, or even as a Lolly finalist, because I would still be doing that project in 2025, whether I want to or not, but it's not one that I felt the need to add to my box. And at this moment, I haven't skipped or added anything to my box for December. All right, and then in terms of add-ons, I believe that Book of the Month only had two. So the first one was a paranormal romance called The Rebel and the Rose by Catherine Doyle. I believe that the first book in this series was featured on Book of the Month. It does say, welcome back to the city of Fantôme, where love, magic, and political intrigue collide in this spellbinding sequel. So it does say sequel, so it sounds like you do need to read the first book before you can read this one. It is 400 plus pages, the second in a series, multiple viewpoints, and enemies to lovers. So if you did get that first book in the Book of the Month edition, you might want to race to get this one in the Book of the Month edition as well, because you just never know when Book of the Month is going to continue series or stop putting the series on there. And then this final one for the month of December was actually quite a surprise. It's a dark romance called The Wicked by Rebecca Johnpie. Mobsters, mafia, and messy love affairs collide in this pulpy dark romance. And this also has been tagged with gruesome, and it says not for the faint of heart. Again, 400 plus pages, enemies to lovers, multiple viewpoints, and apparently it is extra spicy. So this again, to me, is like Book of the Month kind of branching out. I don't think that this is something that they normally would feature, but I do think that they are tapping a market that would be really, really interested in this story. All right, friends, I'm gonna go ahead and try to change my battery really quick because it's getting on the lower side, and we know that my camera battery likes to die even with substantial amount of battery left. So I'm going to take a moment to pause, then we will get into Aardvark's December's selections. All right, we're back. Moving into Aardvark's December selections, we are starting with a horror called Itch by Gemma Amor. Something moves on the forest floor. Josie is at rock bottom, burned out, heartbroken, and recovering from an abusive relationship. She lives a haunted existence after returning to her isolated hometown on the edge of the Forest of Dean. But the tall, dense pine trees are not the only things casting shadows across her skin. Josie's hopes of a fresh start are horribly derailed when she stumbles across a dead woman's decaying, ant-infested body in the woods. The grim discovery sends her into a downward spiral, forcing her to face uncomfortable truths about the victim and her own past, all whilst battling the swarming black ants that seem to have burrowed into her mind and her flesh. As Josie struggles with infestations of all kinds, she scratches the surface of an age-old mystery. A masked predator stalks the forest around Elwood, a place deeply gripped by ancient folklore and strange customs. So when the village dresses up for its annual festival, Josie gets closer and closer to unveiling a monster and begins to ask, are these dark, crawling insects leading her to uncover the truth, or is she their next victim? So that definitely sounds like it's going to be very, very creepy, but it is not one that piqued my interest. I'm pretty selective when it comes to horror, and this is not doing it for me. All right, so next we actually have a debut historical fantasy romance called The Once and Future Queen by Paula Lafferty. This says Outlander meets The Princess Bride plus Camelot in a fresh, big-hearted feminist time-slip adventure reimagining the epic saga of King Arthur as told from the perspective of his spunky and surprising queen Vera, complete with time travel and good running shoes. So this again is definitely not one that piques my interest. I am not a fan of historical fantasy. I'm really not interested in anything set in the Arthurian time period or anything like that. So this was certainly another easy pass for me. Now this next one actually does intrigue me. It's a debut sci-fi romance, and this actually says that it's new to North America. The title is currently published in the UK only, and the Aardvark edition represents the first North American print run. It is called Who Wants to Live Forever by Hannah Thomas Uosi or Uos. I don't know entirely how to pronounce her last name, but it says, Yuki and Sam are soulmates. They are destined to spend the rest of their lives together. They are supposed to love one another forever. But when a miracle drug is created, which can extend a human's life indefinitely, Sam decides to live forever rather than love Yuki forever. What comes next is a time-bending, decades-long, world-building epic set across the globe and narrated by an intersecting cast of characters. Who Wants to Live Forever is the greatest romance you will ever read without the happily ever after. So I'm actually really, really intrigued by that. What would you do if your soulmate wanted to live forever and you didn't? That just seems like it's going to be really complicated, really messy, and I would be very intrigued to explore that more. All right, then next we actually have another debut historical fiction. It is a book called Canticle by Janet Rich Edwards. This says, set in 13th century Bruges, this debut novel follows a young woman's exploration of faith, agency, and love among a community of fiercely independent women. Introducing a spirited, indelible heroine and a major new talent, Canticle is a luminous work of historical fiction, vividly evoking a world on the verge of transformation. I used to be a really big historical fiction person, but now I'm a lot more selective in the historical fiction that I do read, and I'm really not interested in anything set so far back as 13th century Bruges. You know what I mean? So right off the bat, I knew that this one probably wouldn't be for me, but I do like some of the themes that it seems like this is going to explore. It's going to surround a bunch of fiercely independent women, and we know that in the 13th century, right, it's probably not as natural for women to be so independent. So I'm wondering what is going to come of that. But yes, this was another one that was easily skipped by me. Only 2 more releases to talk about here. First, we have Victorian Psycho by Virginie Fateau. This is a historical gothic horror that is also part satirical comedy. And it sounds like this is going to be Aardvark's highlight 2025 pick. So it's kind of like Book of the Month's yearly look back. This is their version of that. Winifred Naughty arrives at Ensor House prepared to play the perfect Victorian governess. She'll dutifully tutor her charges, Drusilla and Andrew, tell them bedtime stories, and only joke about eating children. But the longer Winifred spends within the estate's dreary confines, and the more she learns of the perversions and pathetic preoccupations of the Pounds family, the more trouble she has sticking to her plan. Whether creeping across the moonlit lawns in her undergarments or gently tormenting the house staff, Winifred struggles at every turn to stifle the horrid compulsions of her past until her chillingly dark imagination breaches the feeble boundary of reality on Christmas morning. It says that this is a riveting tale of a bloodthirsty governess who learns the true meaning of vengeance. So I'm sure that that is probably something that is going to appeal to a lot of people. I don't think it's any surprise to you that it did not appeal to me. All right, and then the very final release that we're going to talk about in this video is actually a holiday romance, and it's called Grace and Henry's Holiday Movie Marathon by Matthew Norman. A sentimental advertising creative and a blunt, no-nonsense bar owner find a second chance at love while binge-watching iconic holiday movies in this poignant and heartwarming romance from the author of Charm City Rocks and All Together Now. So when I first saw this on Aardvark, I was actually really excited because back in, I think it was like September, when I talked about all of the holiday romances coming out in 2025, this is one that really stood out to me because I like the themes. It follows 2 people who each lost their spouse about a year ago, and now they're coming up to their first holiday season without their spouse. They're very much grieving. They're very much sad. They somehow meet and connect, and they know that they understand each other's pain, right? And so there's apparently like this holiday movie festival going on in their town, and so he invites her to be a part of it and to watch the movies with him, although she's not necessarily a fan. And then through this experience, they grow closer and they start to fall in love. And so I really liked the idea of that. I really liked the idea of these 2 grieving people finding each other and having a second chance at love, all while watching holiday movies, which I personally am a really big fan of. And so this is one that I was tempted to add to my box, but there is an option for a little bit of a sneak peek at the bottom of all of these synopses on Aardvark, and I did not love the writing style. Matthew Norman likes to write in a very casual conversational style, and I do not vibe with that in writing. Like, I do not want my books written like you are having a casual conversation with somebody or the reader or something to that effect. You know what I mean? And the first words in this are, all things considered, I'm doing okay. I get that that sounds like something someone says when they're not doing okay. I don't know, that sentence is just like really poorly written, and just reading the sneak peek, I was like, the writing style in this is going to drive me absolutely bonkers, and so I passed. So as of right now, I have not added anything to my Aardvark box for December. I don't know if I'm going to. If I am, it's going to be that sci-fi novel because I think that that is really interesting topic. And again, if I was going to compare the 2 boxes for December, I would say that Book of the Month pretty easily won this one in my opinion. I feel like it featured a lot of really strong titles. You have Good Spirits, you have a really popular new fantasy novel, you have a wonderful horror novel that I potentially would have expected to see on Aardvark, and that horror novel intrigues me more than any of the horror novels that were featured on Aardvark recently. I do think that their main selections for December was stronger than Aardvark's main selections for December, but you'll have to let me know your thoughts. All right, everybody, that is it. We have finally made it. We have done my pick or pass for both November and December for Book of the Month and Aardvark. Please comment down below and let me know what your thoughts are on November and December selections for both book boxes. Did you pick or pass? If you picked, what did you get? What were your thoughts on both months for both of these boxes? I would love to know. Or if you have made it to the end of this video and you are not feeling chatty, go ahead and leave me a cat emoji in honor of all of the interruptions I experienced in this video because of one Sir Archibald. And as always, if you like this video or if you just like me, please like, comment, and subscribe. It is free for you, but it absolutely helps me and my channel so very much. And y'all know that I love seeing your comments down below. As always, I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons. I love and appreciate you all so much, and I wouldn't be able to do this content without you. If you are interested in joining our wonderful, small, close-knit community, I always leave the Patreon link down below, as well as my other social media and all of the books featured in the video. Until next time, y'all. Bye.